Welcome back. Tonight we're going to take a look at Alexei Panshin's 1968 Nebula Award winning novel, Rite of Passage. Now when this novel came out, it was up against some pretty stiff competition. It was an absolutely wonderful year in 1968. We had Black Easter by James Blish, Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. We had Robert Silverberg in the mix with The Mask of Time, and Picnic on Paradise by Joanne Russ. So great lineup, and Alexei Panshin did really well to win that year. So this novel is really the story of young 12-year-old Mia Haviro. And Mia is this young girl who lives on this multi-generational starship. And she's telling a story in a first-person account. It's basically her novel. And what she tells us is that Earth is destroyed in the year 2041. There's some kind of catastrophic event and the planet is basically destroyed. And they've been living on this, and humanity as a whole has been living on this multi-generational, faster-than-light starships. Mia is living in the year 2098, where she's getting ready to face her rite of passage. And she's really just telling us what life is like on these starships. So we learn through the eyes of this 12-year-old what school is like, what her friends are like. And we learn about Mia's internal conflict as well. So she's this really feisty, punky little 12-year-old, but she's also suffering from anxiety in many different ways. So she just absolutely hates change. And her father sees that in her, and he's trying to get her ready for this rite of passage by moving between levels on the ship just to help break that sense of comfort for Mia. And we learn what that's like through the eyes of this young 12-year-old, how she has to adjust with new friends on the different decks, how she has to move on and make new friends, and the internal turmoil that she has in doing that. And in order to help her deal with this rite of passage, her father, being the ship's council chairman, has many opportunities to go on these colony planets on trading missions. So he ultimately convinces her to join him on one of these colony planets, just to get, again, acquainted with change and to get a different worldview as well, right? Not to just be stuck on this starship for the rest of her life, but to experience what life is like on the colony planets. Because what we learn is that Mia is a bit of a xenophobe. She just really looks down on these colony planets, as do a lot of different people on the starships as well. So there's almost these two different classes of people, and there's a lot of conflict between those two different colonies, where Mia refers to the colonists as mud eaters. And when she does get onto these colony planets on the trading mission, we find that the colonists don't think any higher or any better of the starship faring people either. They refer to them as grabbers because they basically fly in, grab all this stuff and just fly off again, right? So there's this there's a lot of conflict and almost hate between the colony planets and the starship faring people. So we learn all this through this 12-year-old girl's point of view, and we learn that population control is very important for the starship faring people, where they have very strict policies on who can conceive and father or mother children, and it's really tightly regulated. So any deviation or any breach of contract has huge ramifications, where people are basically exiled and sent to these colony planets alone, which is almost seen as a death sentence. So there's a very strict sense of birth control, and life on a starship would have to be obviously very controlled, because you can't, it's a confined space, right? So they have that mentality, which helps them foster almost hate for colonists, and they just can't quite understand how colony people live on these planets where they have so much space. So we're learning all this through her retelling of the story. And we also learn that she's getting ready for her rite of passage, because that happens when she turns 14. And what we learn is that they go to these survival schools. It's sort of somewhat reminiscent of Starship Troopers for me for some reason, that particular part of the novel. But they get to these training schools, and they're basically equipped with all the survival skills they would need to survive life on the colony planet all by themselves, so unaided. And that's what we learn a rite of passage is basically these young children, these 14-year-olds, getting dumped on these colony planets to fend for themselves. So we get to a point in the novel where she's gone through the training school, the survival school, and she's now ready for a rite of passage as she turns 14. And she is dumped on this colony world called Tintera, her with some of her school friends that have turned 14, and a boyfriend called Jimmy. And when I land on the planet, they come across all different kinds of trials, and I find that the colonists are really not adhering to some of the strict policies that the starship expects colonists to live by, and some pretty interesting things happen because of that, and we'll leave it at that for the plot overview. It's a very enjoyable novel, Alexei Panshin's Rite of Passage. I really did like young Mia Havira. I just liked this spunk and a no holds bar attitude, right? She was a feisty little kid who would just not let anyone, no matter what size, have the better of her. So I really enjoyed her spark there. She did have faults, right? I didn't quite really enjoy the way she disliked people that were different to her. I feel she was a bit of a xenophobe there. I didn't really like that aspect of her character, but I did really like her spunk. So I thought she was really cool, very believable 12-year-old. Now, I'm not quite sure if Alexei has children or if he had a female daughter, but I thought the character was very believable. I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I could see a 12-year-old girl in the writing that Alexei Panshin did here. So I thought he really did that well, writing as a 12-year-old girl. I'm not quite sure exactly what goes on in a 12-year-old girl, but I've seen it through the eyes of a father of the 12-year-old girl, 2 of them at some point in time, and I could see different aspects of that in the novel, in the writing, which I thought was pretty cool. The other thing I really enjoyed is the world building, right? It's not a huge world, but we're talking about a confined space in the starship. But I really did like the way Panshin described the starship through the eyes of this 12-year-old girl, how the society worked on the spaceship, again, through the eyes of this 12-year-old girl. And I thought the balance was okay as far as, describing things in the eyes of, an adolescent person would do. Which I thought was really good. I thought the balance was really good, and it's really just a wonderful coming-of-age novel, right? And it was very much like reminiscent of Heinlein's, junior fiction stories as well. I did see elements that remind me of Robert Heinlein's juvenile novels that he had. So there's an aspect of that. I said the writing is very different. It's a different league to Robert Heinlein. Still very enjoyable, but I did get flashback of some of the earlier Heinlein juvenile novels as well. So one of the things that was enjoyable for me, and also a bit surprising, is that young Mia was given a philosophy paper to do. And in doing that, she had to talk about Stoicism and Epicureans, and I just thought power philosophers. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I actually enjoyed that deviation. I did find it a bit unbelievable, though, coming from a 13-year-old. I don't know many 13-year-olds who go into that depth of philosophy. Not that it was overly done, but I thought, as a minor criticism, I really enjoyed it. It was sort of one of those weird ones where I really enjoyed that little break in her talking about philosophy. But I also found it a bit of a stretch for a 12 to 13-year-old talking the way she did and her worldviews. But hey, I'm sure there are 12 and 13-year-olds out there that think that way. Maybe they're not like I was when I was a 12-year-old boy, let's say, because those kind of thoughts were well away from my mind back then. So the novel talks about, population control, and also about, befolding technologies from developing world like the colony planets here. And we saw similar kind of themes in Death World by Harry Harrison when I reviewed it on this channel. So that has themes like that, similar to this, where these starships are withholding technology from the colony planets in order to have the upper hand on them, which I found interesting and deeper than what I expected or what I remembered in Alexei Panshin's novel. So look, yeah, I thought there was quite a fair bit to like in the novel, but what didn't I like? Look, I remember during one point in the novel, I had a big smile on my face, because it is that coming-of-age novel, and that it gives you those kind of feelings where you can sort of remember, even me now as a middle-aged person, remember those, your first kiss, right? And there were moments like that in the novel, which I thought, how great, how sweet that is, your first kiss. You can forget their first kiss. But I think it took that a bit too far in the novel. There was one particular scene, and I don't want to talk to it. I don't want to give spoilers away. But there's one particular part in the novel that I thought, really, I don't think we need to go there. I just thought it was a bit tasteless, really. And I thought it was a bit too descriptive, and it it's not a huge criticism, but I don't know. It's not that I don't expect a 12-year-old girl to think or act that way. I think she was 13 or 14 at the time. But I just thought, I don't know, I think it took away from the romance. Maybe call me old-fashioned, right? Perhaps call me old-fashioned, but I just thought that particular scene in the novel, it sort of took away from the romance. And I thought, you know, if I can pick anything on, I'll pick on that. I really didn't like that part of the novel. I thought it was better omitted than it was. I don't think it added to the enjoyment of the novel, and for me, it actually detracted from it. So yeah, look, I really enjoyed Alexei Panshin's A Rite of Passage. I first read this book, it must have been 18, 19 years ago. And unfortunately, when it comes to the latter, you know, I can't say it's a memorable novel, right? I do recall, I always remember, you know, oh yes, I've read Alexei Panshin's A Rite of Passage, and I know that it's a coming-of-age novel, and I remember it's about this little girl who goes through this rite, and the title gives it away, right? And I think that's really why I remembered it, is because you just have to pick up the book and see, oh yeah, Rite of Passage, and you automatically know what it's about, right? It's some kind of trial that you're going through. So I remembered it in that sense, but I can't really say I remembered Mia. I can't say I remembered, you know, her boyfriend or any of the characters that she meets along the way, nor do I remember the actual ending of the novel, which I thought was really, really interesting ending and a really difficult question. And the way that the actual, you know, starship faring people resolved that was, you know, confronting and in your face, and I really enjoyed the ending of the novel, but I can't say I remembered it at all. But look, overall, I really did enjoy Alexei Panshin's A Rite of Passage. I haven't read anything else from Alexei Panshin. I know he wrote several other books, but he's nowhere near as big as some of the other authors that have won Hugo and Nebula Award winning novels. So if you can recommend another Alexei Panshin novel, I'd love to hear from you, because I did enjoy the novel. I thought it was well written, and the story was fine. I enjoyed the story overall. So it'll be really interesting to see how it fares up on our, you know, Hugo Award winning Nebula ladder that we've got going. So how about I set up and we'll go right to it. So back to the Sci-Fi Shared ladder, where I've been ranking all these wonderful Hugo and Nebula Award winning novels. I've reorganized the board a little. I've got two different columns going now, from ascending to descending order on the A side and the B side. And I've done that in order to help make decisions quicker. And also, as the list increases, we might have an A and a B board. So it helps us manage things a little bit better, I think. So leading the A board at the moment, we've got June from Frank Herbert, the 1965 and 66 Nebula and Hugo Award winning novel, with red shirts bottoming out on the side A. And side B, we got Flowers for Algernon leading the charge with the fifth season trailing behind. So where do we start with A Rite of Passage? Well, I think it's not going to be on the A side. And the main reason for that, I thought the writing was wonderful. I thought the character was okay. I did like Mia. But I don't think it really addressed any major... I don't think there were enough significant themes in the novel. It was a juvenile novel, so I understand that, and it was a coming-of-age novel, but there are so many coming-of-age novels in the marketplace, not just in science fiction, but fantasy as well, and I found it difficult to really understand what did this bring to the table that was different in some of those other novels that I've read in the past. So I really did enjoy it. I thought it was a wonderful book, but it has that against it. I don't think the theme was so strong or memorable, apart from just a coming-of-age novel. Right? So the theme itself was a challenge for me. The other thing that makes it not rank on the A side is the memory test. Like, I really couldn't remember much of this novel at all. Like I said, the title is what made me reminded me what this novel was about. But apart from that, there was nothing really much else that sort of stuck in my mind. Where a lot of these books, when I looked at the list, and I haven't changed the order, mind you, so these are in the exact same order as I first reviewed them. So I haven't changed the order, I've just separated into two different columns. And I would say that what most of these books, if not every single one of them, except for maybe one or two, like, what was it? Left Hand of Darkness, for example. A lot of these novels just stuck in my mind, or they had a very strong theme, or they were just brilliantly written, like Ursula's The Left Hand of Darkness. Flowers for Algernon, like I've said in the past, I absolutely loved Flowers for Algernon. And the reason it doesn't rank on the A side that highly is because for me, I'm really looking at science fiction or fantasy themes in the novel, and it ranks really highly, just how strong or how much of an impact those themes have, those science fiction or fantasy themes. And I absolutely loved Flowers of Algernon. If this was what are your best fiction novels, not science fiction or fantasy, but fiction novels, Algernon would be right up there as one of my favorite, all-time favorite fiction novels, right? But I'm trying to keep true to the science fiction and fantasy theme. And for me, I love Flowers, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of science fiction or fantasy themes that I was looking for in a novel of that genre. So keep that in mind. And that's sort of the ranking. And then Babel, Babel ranks there because, you know, Samuel R. Delaney's writing for me. I've just finished reading another one of his novels, which will come up in next week's review, actually, if you want to stick around. But I don't know, Samuel R. Delaney's, his character's a bit weird. The ending I didn't really like in Babel 17. So that gives you the sort of picture, right? We've got A side, B side. And tonight, Rite of Passage, I thoroughly enjoyed the novel, but I think I'm going to rank it on the B side because of that. No real strong, memorable themes that stuck in my mind, nor could I remember the characters. I don't think the characters were that strong or well developed. Still a very enjoyable read. So I'm going to start with the B side. And is it better than the 5th season? And a lot of people are going to hate me for it, but I think it was. I really did think it was. The 5th season, I don't know. There's just something about that novel that doesn't gel with me. I'm hoping that the sequels will reignite a passion or ignite a passion for Jemison for me. But I really didn't enjoy writing that novel. It's a personal preference. I know it's probably my problem. I know there are a lot of people that absolutely love that book. I'm just not one of those people. So I can't rank Rite of Passage below the 5th season. Now, Where Late the Sweetbird Sang was also a wonderful novel. I really did enjoy Kate Wilhelm's writing. I did like the story as a whole, but I'd say that the criticisms of Where Late the Sweetbird Sang and Rite of Passage are very similar. I think the theme of those clones wasn't extremely strong for me. I only read that book, it was less than 10 years ago, yet I couldn't remember any of it when I was reading through it. And that's why it's ranked as low as it has. But it was a really enjoyable book. Babel 17, I did like the relative linguistic study there. Linguistic relativity, I can never say that word properly. Linguistic relativity themes in that book are very strong themes, right? So I think the theme, it was a good one. And that's why it ranked over Where Late Sweetbird Sang. But I really didn't enjoy it. It's going to be somewhere here. It's going to be under Flowers for Algernon or under Babel 17. Yeah. And I think I enjoyed Rite of Passage more than I did Babel 17. So we're going to rank it right there for tonight. I'll tidy that up off camera.
Yes, that's a mistake. It's supposed to be sitting ahead of Babel 17.
So let's just have a think about that. The 5th season, yeah, I enjoyed definitely Rite of Passage more. Where Late Sweetbird Sang's really good novel. I did really like Where Late the Sweetbird Sang. But, you know, I'm going to put Rite of Passage above it. There were a couple of passages in the novel where I smiled, right? I almost felt like that young boy, you know, I know it was a girl writing there, but I felt like that young boy. You know, there were certain parts in the novel where I could relate to young Mia, and that coming of age and finding yourself, having your first kiss. There were moments like that in the book that I had a smile on my face when I was reading it. I can't recall having that same feelings when I read Where Late the Sweetbird Sang. So I think I'm happy with that. That's where it's going to sit. All wonderful novels. Yeah, so A and B sides. So we'll start with that, A or B. I think it's definitely on the B side. And I think we can safely say that Yeah, I'm happy with that. Hey, I hope you like the new format. We might have an A and B side eventually. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you've read other Alexei Panshin novels that you would recommend, I really would like to hear from you. I did enjoy his novels, and I'm keen to read more of his work. Because yeah, that's the only one I've read, and I've read it twice now. That was my second reading for this review. So I'd love to hear from you. So I've been Peter, this has been the Sci-Fi Shed and the ladder behind me, and I thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time in the shed.